All right, and now I want to turn to Jeff Jordan. As you remember last week, Jeff showed us, I think, a pretty unique way of figure painting, and tonight he's going to continue that. So Jeff, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. So picking up on figure painting for people who can't paint figures, which, as I said, included me when I started working on developing the technique I'm demonstrating in this program. And so picking up where we left off last week, we're working on the outer clothing, which begins to demonstrate the unique aspect of this technique using the primer and letting the primer show through the washes of paint and naturally give you highlights rather than having to apply separate coats of paint to get shadows and highlights. And you can begin to see that very nicely in this photograph underway in the left there. And then on the right, pretty much that's what the technique yields. Notice the fellow's pants. You see the highlights on the knees. You see the deeper spots in the wrinkles. And it all just comes from using the Vallejo paint thinned with water, no special thinner. I don't use the Vallejo thinner. I don't use the Vallejo retarder. I use water. I don't use alcohol. One, I don't think Vallejo reacts very well to alcohol, and it would dry too quickly. One of the things that you get by using the water here is it enables you to move the paint around a little bit while you're applying it and make sure it gets into the deep crevices, and you can actually remove some with a dry brush or the corner of a bit of paper towel. And so it gives you some real flexibility as you're working. So going on here, you can see the early part of the technique here. In the tin, there is the Vallejo paint and a drop of water. And I just pull them together in that tin with the paintbrush to get a consistency of a wash. And that's important that you have a wash. It's better to start thin and go back for another coat than to go too thick and you lose the effect we're looking for. You can see again in the left-hand photo, just it's virtually the first brush full on his back, and you can see how it on its own settles into the crevices and thins out on the high spots. Similarly on the blacksmith on the right, though, he's not nearly as deeply sculpted as the Aspen model. You can see on his apron, that's just one coat. And therefore, you can see the primer showing through, and you can adjust that by adding more paint to your liking. More outer clothing. Here, it's the shirt. Again, a dab of paint, a dab of water in the tin, and then you draw them together to get that wash consistency. And you can see on the back of his shirt, again, the first application settles into the crevices, thins out on the high spots, and the primer shows through. Also, incidentally, I do not use any of the flow additives. I believe Vallejo sells one, certainly Liquitex sells them, that are supposed to break the surface tension of the water. I have not found that to be necessary. I find that it flows into the crevices just fine without breaking the surface tension. Now, so after you've worked your way out, you've done the shirt, then you've done the pants, then you've done the jacket, that you can work on the accessories, such as the hat and the shoes. Again, I use a thin wash of paint. I like on this fella, you can see on the left, the brim of the hat is naturally highlighted because the paint flows off of there. Similarly, the shoes get kind of a beat up look by using a wash that again lets some of the primer show through. A few more details here. You can see on the left, the pants leg Also, you can see that the left-hand shoe has been painted. The right-hand shoe is just waiting to be painted. On the right-hand side here, you can see the technique with the shoe even better. His left shoe is painted and very fresh. It's still shiny. It'll flatten down as it dries. And you can see on the right-hand shoe how a little bit of the seam and so forth is actually showing through, so you don't get a monochromatic effect on the shoes. Finally, other details. The blacksmith here has a hammer. The hammer is very simple. You don't need to worry about shading very much there. Again, I use the spotter brush and here use the paint virtually as it comes out of the bottle. The advantage of that is it doesn't run. So when you're doing these very, very fine details, using the paint pretty much as it comes out of the bottle with a spotter brush enables you to apply it very precisely without having to worry about it running into places you didn't want it. And notice that there's actually two colors there because the handle is brown and the head of the hammer is a gunmetal color. Same deal on the right-hand side with the oiler, pretty much using the paint as it comes out of the bottle and applying it with the smallest brush. So finishing up, let it dry and take a look. As you can see here, these guys, especially the one on the left and the one in the middle, is not entirely dry when this picture was taken. There's still some wet spots, and the Vallejo paint appearance changes as it dries. It goes on darker, it goes on glossy looking. As the water comes out of it, the appearance will change. Fortunately, it dries very quickly. Again, I don't do anything to accelerate the drying. I don't use a hair dryer or something like that. I tend to work on several figures at the same time so that I can rotate through them and set one side and work on the next one and even work on the third one and then come back to the first one. And by then he's dry and you can evaluate what you got and whether you want to put an additional wash onto his pants or his hat here, perhaps. You can also see the fellow on the left has got the brown wash that's highlighted or darkened the eye sockets and the mouth and brought out those features. Similarly, the blacksmith there on the right, slight wash just in the eye sockets, so it brings out the relief. And so once you're happy, let it dry overnight. Make sure everything is really dry and just give yourself an opportunity to take a fresh look at it. These guys are very small, and set them aside for a while after you've painted them and come back and look for mistakes where one color got on top of another where you didn't want it, where there's a void, that is a place where the paint didn't reach that you want to fill in, and do all of that, preferably the next day, and catch any mistakes you've made in the process. Final coat. After you're completely happy with the results, I then give them a spray with, in my case, Tamiya flat clear, or you could use dull coat, anything like that. Just don't drown them. You know, if you get too wet, you'll get that white frosty effect. And I find that Tamiya clear is easy to avoid that. It goes on very thin, gives you a dead flat finish. You don't want anything glossy on these guys. The fabric of their clothing certainly should be flat, the tools, etc. And so the flat clear finishing up. Here's some of the finished figures in place. There's the finished blacksmith in his shop. You'll notice that I added into his right hand a bit of work piece of metal that he's just taken out of the forge, and the end is glowing white hot, and he's headed over to the anvil to work on the piece. The rectangle in the middle there is an artifact of the photography that's not on the photograph, but we got like 3 different sets of lighting going on in that picture between the room light, the light in the structure, and the flash on the camera, and they kind of fought with each other. Over on the right there's the oiler. He's been put in place. Again, see his pants, also his jacket. I decided to do something a little different. With railroad crews, you can end up with everybody all wearing blue, and they didn't look like that, especially on a little railroad like the Rio Grande Southern. You get a much more of a variety of clothing. So this fellow got a gray jacket, and again, the Alpine or Aspen models figure with the deep contouring. Notice all the nice detail that's come out just from the painting technique, and how the gray paint has settled into the seams and into the pockets and into the creases, making his clothing look very realistic. There's another figure in place. This one I'm particularly happy with the outcome. I really am working to get engineers into all of my locomotives. I want somebody driving. And so this is an Aspen Models engineer. He fits beautifully, partially because, as we noted early on, he doesn't have any legs. And so you don't have to worry about cutting off the legs. He literally was a drop fit in this tight cab, and everything falls right in place. His arm rests on the windowsill. His left hand is up on the throttle. The shading on his face from just that second coat of thinned brown makes you see that he's got facial features, but no whites of his eyes. So that's pretty much the technique. This fella here is a factory product, and he's going to be reworked to get rid of the googly eyes and to get rid of the funny looking bandana. But again, I really enjoy putting figures on my layout. They give scale to the models. They make it look much more lifelike than a ghost town. And now with this technique, everybody can take a shot at painting figures. Opens up the world of all these nice unpainted figures. Don't need to intimidate you, that with just a little bit of time and the primer and wash technique, you can get a very credible looking figure. Yes, there are people out there who do incredible figures that have extraordinary detail. They have plaid jackets and they have buttons and so forth. But my guys are in the background for the most part, and they look believable. And I got there without very much talent. So that's what I got. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Jeff? Jeff, I love the technique. I really do, and I can't thank you enough for showing it to everybody.
I encourage anybody who wants to paint figures to give it a try. It's taking the intimidation out of painting. I'm working on my second set of 3 figures right now.
Well, it's a good program, no question about it. I love the way your people look. Thanks so much.
Thank you.